Today's video is dedicated to Saturn in the 6th house. We'll break down its challenges, karmic lessons, as well as ways of integrating it. Let's take a look. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal, relationship, and predictive readings. I work in whole sign house system with the tropical zodiac. If you enjoy my work, please take a few seconds to leave me a like, a comment, subscribe, and press the notification bell. Watch more of my content. That is how YouTube algorithm knows to bring more audience my way, helps me grow. You can also say thank you by buying me a tea, a coffee, a little present, whatever your heart desires. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for sending me happy thoughts and supporting me in whichever way you can. If you're interested in working with me, you have personal questions, visit anastasiadoesastrology.com. On there you can find a variety of readings I offer. There is a natal chart reading, which is more general, predictive readings like solar return, best done around your birthday or year ahead reading, relationship consultation. I can also help you figure out the best place to relocate to, as well as help you choose the date for your wedding or other important life event. All of that can be found at anastasiadoesastrology.com. On there, you can also find products I create. There are paper products like zodiacal notebooks, as well as my 2025 astrology planner. In this video, we're talking about Saturn in the 6th house, and 6th house is the house of hard work, labors, blood, sweat, and tears. So I'd like to highlight one of my more optimistic and uplifting candles, and that is my almond moon. This candle captures the moon in Cancer in the sign of rulership. Very good for emotional stability, peace, and calm. It can help manifest your desires. This is the best for manifestation, for setting intentions, for achieving your goals and dreams. Highly recommend this for anyone born with Saturn in the 6th. Even more so if you were born with your moon in Capricorn or Scorpio, which are the signs of fall and detriment. And if your moon is placed in the 6th, 8th, or 12th houses of a conjoined squares opposes Saturn. Additionally, you might consider getting my Jupiter in Taurus candle, especially if you are a Cancer or Libra rising, because then your 6th house is ruled by Jupiter. This one is the planet of good luck, optimism, and abundance, co-present with the sign, with the planet that rules it, Venus in Taurus, and it can also be great for creating more abundance and joy and optimism in your life. All of those are on my website. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about my creations. So before we talk about Saturn in the 6th house, let's just take a look at Saturn in general. This video, this series is very heavily based on Liz Green's book called Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil. If you want to know more about Saturn, highly recommend. The writing is a little bit sort of packed together, and sometimes it's not the easiest to read a lot at once, but it's definitely very kind of informative and interesting, highly insightful book. I really recommend. But Saturn is the last visible planet. It is the planet that our naked eye can see, but can see it barely, right? So Saturn astronomically is very far away. It represents the border between visible and invisible worlds. And in astrology, Saturn rules boundaries, Saturn rules borders, Saturn rules walls and heavy, serious like structures in life. And those can be restrictive, right? If we think of the young adult or like a young person being limited by their duties to their ailing parents, or being limited by the constrictions of the family budget. Like Saturn can be restrictive, and Saturn is often connected to talking about time and time running out and duties and delays and all of these like heavy topics. However, that same boundaries and that same structures and that same walls can protect us when we're talking about having a home that protects you, or we're talking about boundaries, things that you've learned. Liz Green talks a lot about it in her book, that Saturn is not just difficulty, but it is the experience of growth and the growth. It is that experience that teaches you things, right? And a lot of times we learn more by facing hardship than we learn by having a fun day in the park. So Saturn can represent the hardening of the person, the growth, the maturation of the person, their ability to overcome difficulty. And so oftentimes early in life, Saturn feels heavy, and Saturn feels serious, and Saturn feels like, full of obligations, and it brings hardship in the life of the individual. But if you welcome him, if you tend to him carefully, if you accept him, if you heed his lessons, he can also help you. So what is Saturn in the 6th house? What is the 6th house, right? In a natal chart, we start with the 1st house, right? The 1st house is your body. And you can think of it as the baby being born. First, the baby begins to understand its own body, putting its toes in its mouth, right? Like sort of understanding the existence of self, survival of self. 2nd house represents our possessions, and you can think of it as the baby starts to say mine, 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 and begins to grab onto things, right? The 3rd house is the house of communication, and the child develops speech and begins to recognize the siblings and people around them. 4th house is the house of home, family, childhood foundations, and here we find our parents, our childhood, our early conditioning. 5th house is the house of play, so the child begins to play and learn themselves through that. And then 6th house is the house of routines. It's the house of work and health and service. So sometimes this house, because it's a cadent house, it gets overlooked. Even you hear me oftentimes when I talk about my creations, and I mention the 6th house as a rather difficult house because it can be full of the grind on some level. It's not the most playful house, but it is greatly important, right? Because through structuring your work life, through structuring your health, through having healthy routines, you can actually integrate everything you've been learning about yourself or about your life or whatever it might be and come into this world as a full-fledged individual. If you are playful and you have family and you have possessions, but then your inner life, your health routines are a mess, like what kind of person can you be? So 6th house is the place of work, health. It can represent health in terms of like, what are your tendencies towards like things befalling you, organic or functional illnesses that come into your life. It describes servants, or it describes, classically back in the day, it would have been the house of servants. Right now, it's the house of colleagues, or it's the house of employees, people who work for you. It can describe your work habits and the kind of situations you're more likely to attract in your work life. It can also describe your attitudes towards routine and work and your body, right? For example, if you are a Libra rising, your 6th house is Pisces, and so Pisces can be very much go with the flow and let things slip through their attention span, and sometimes they kind of want other people to do things for them. And as a Libra rising myself, I can absolutely confirm that that's how it goes for me, that I'm not necessarily too fond of like the minute everyday routines, but those are, like I said, highly important, because through tending to our physical body, through taking care of the bills, through organizing our life in constructive ways, we also create the peace of mind. Most of you probably know that if you are sitting at a desk that is full of clutter, and it's harder to focus mentally, right? Similarly, if you're surrounded by clutter in your space. So 6th house is highly important for realizing that tie between your mental health and physical health. And in fact, 6th house opposes the 12th, and so the two are interconnected through that opposition. 6th house is the place where one purifies themselves, organizes their life, synthesizing everything they have learned, like I said, in the previous 5 houses and creates an integrated personality. This is the house where you take care of your possessions, you take care of your body, first house, you take care of your messages that you're sending, third house, you take care of your property, you take care of your children, right, and their health. So it is a highly, highly important house. And so work here is not just the work that we do to earn the livelihood. It can be, but it's almost like, you know, symbol of like preparation, purification, and kind of getting ready for higher, better things. So and the body and the health is very much a symbol of how well integrated you are, right? Sometimes 6th house in modern astrology is connected with the sign of Virgo. That is more sort of modern approach where there is a 12-letter alphabet almost, like houses are connected to zodiac signs. I am a traditional Hellenistic astrologer, so I don't necessarily look at it like that. But if you do consider the similarity between Virgo and the 6th house, one might look at the mythology and the origin of the sign of Virgo, where Virgos and like virgin goddesses were not virgins in the sense of like their sexual purity, but they were very much an island upon themselves. They were owned by no man. They were actually like, some of those goddesses were like prostitutes, so they were quite, open-minded, but they were owned by no one. They had their unique autonomy. They were like integrated within themselves. And so the 6th house, in that way, if you consider it connected to Virgo, which Liz Green does, you can think of 6th house as connected with like wholeness, synthesis, integration of the various warring components of the psyche. So what happens when you have Saturn in the 6th house, right? A lot of times an individual born with Saturn in the 6th house may have to deal with some kind of chronic illness. They may come into this world with Saturnian obstacles, right? Through the sense of illness or through the sense of dissatisfaction with their work life or some kind of limitation in their work life, restrictions represented by Saturn. In terms of the early childhood, sometimes we see children who grow up without any kind of structure or routine, where things were very much like ups and downs, and there is no careful ordering and organization in their life. And so they may feel like a sense of inadequacy in that way. They may sort of doubt themselves in terms of being parents. Let's say it can go as far as that because they can't organize their own life, so they fear that they won't be able to organize a child's life. Other times you see people who in childhood have like a very heavily structured life, but that structure maybe lacks inner meaning, right? It's like being a child of like a military officer who has like a drill and you wake up at a certain time and you do things a specific way, but there is no effort at doing it for the sake of like inner peace or mental alignment, or no like spiritual element. And so as a result, people may be driven by those fears, right? And like if they didn't have proper structure, even if they had too much structure, they come into this world and they become someone who like almost like compulsively feels they need to organize their environment. Like they sort of maybe those are the people that constantly reorganize their space, they clean, they maybe, like I said, like sort of compulsively are driven to create structure environment. And Saturn may over exaggerate a love of work to a point where people almost become closed-minded to the things that haven't been tried and true. They just sort of prefer to do things the same exact way. Oftentimes this place can be also considered to hypochondria, right? And certain like physical ailments that also result in mental ailments. And what's interesting with the physical and mental ailments both, of course, there are definitely people who are born with like chronic diseases, and those have root in the family life potentially. But sometimes, once in a while, you also see people who are somewhat like scared of their environment or scared of the chaos of life, that they almost develop some kind of like psychosomatic disease. You may also see people who deeply, maybe without understanding it, just crave attention, and so their disease can be very much connected to like, you know, craving attention, so that they sort of dominate their household and they get a lot of attention through like parents and family members taking care of them, or they, you know, they get sick as a means of avoiding things that they're uncomfortable with doing. And that's where the first opportunity, I guess, for integration of Saturn comes in, and that is becoming aware of how your mind works and how what's happening in your mind and the things that you're resisting or don't want to do, or things that make you afraid, how they translate and come into your physical body life. Because once again, with this placement, you cannot avoid looking at your mental health as well, right? You cannot just look at it and be like, this is about my health and my body. It's about both. Like, both are interconnected. So, what else? There is often, like I said, there may be frustration with the work life. There is a natural ability to be very hardworking, very disciplined, very organized. You may be someone who is service oriented, but sometimes you become the service, kind of like your work becomes boring and mundane, and you feel like you're just doing like mundane tasks, and as a result you start to feel like you're almost like confined by your environment and you feel stuck. There may be a sense of like a lack of alignment with people you work with or people you are trying to serve, right? Just as something in your body might not be working, just as like an organ in your body represented by Saturn in the 6th house may be flawed or has a disease. Similarly, you as an organ in a larger group may be out of harmony, right, with that outer structure. So not only you integrating your mind and your body leads to better wellness, but it also leads to better relationship with people around you. So like I said, feeling like you're overworked, feeling like you are, taken advantage of, feeling like there is a sense of tiredness and exhaustion and a lack of recognition, yet at the same time, there may be a fear of actually asking for more, right? And a fear of like, stepping outside of the comfort zone and actually working on bettering your skills and improving your quality of life. So it's like this sense of dissatisfaction, but also a lack of motivation sometimes, and like fear of taking risks. And so working on developing that inner courage and inner purpose is very, very important here. Sometimes with this placement, there might also be a sense that if you do ask for more responsibility, or if you do try to show your courage, you get rejected or you get denied. But that might be the sign of like you projecting self-doubt and you projecting insecurity. And so other people can just be, seeing that. Once in a while with this placement, you see people who are almost obsessed with being healthy, right? Those people who are like consciously reading up on diet and exercising obsessively, and they're like trying to organize their life by being very conscious of their body. But once again, if the mind is not brought into the equation, there will be a sense of illness and frustration and irritability, moodiness, and even depression. So how do we integrate Saturn? Like I said, Saturn here can provide a major opportunity for integration. It will likely give you difficulty, right? It will bring ill health. It will bring work situations that don't make you happy. It will bring a sense of maybe mundane frustration, depression, tiredness in your life, asking you to try and understand once again the interconnectedness between your mind and your body. And it will encourage you to connect these two. And a lot of times that could be done through meditation, yoga, through bringing, once again, like spirituality into the mix, right? Not just working on your body, but understanding what you're doing. Yoga has 8 limbs to it, right? There is social ethics, there's body ethics, there is pranayama, breathing techniques. As a fresh yoga teacher, I can tell you a lot about it. But yoga has a lot to it, right? And so yoga, meditation, even like rituals, magic, astrological rituals, when you're coming to know a certain planet, can all be helpful for creating balance. Seeing service as an innate quality instead of something that needs to be done is important here, because like I said, there's often a sense of like service means mundane, boring, means being stuck. Well, in reality, service is more about like tending to yourself, right? It's like a state of consciousness. It's a state in which you are integrated with yourself and you see yourself very clearly, and then you can diagnose problems in other people and help other people. Oftentimes, people with this placement can make excellent physicians and surgeons and therapists, even lawyers, right? So oftentimes there is a very clear ability to organize, especially once you have integrated it, once you have worked on it. It's not going to be like immediate, right? You have to put effort into using your administrative organizing ability to bring that sort of peace into your life. But yeah, it gives quite a noticeable healing ability and insight into the intricacies of the mind. That's why you can be a great doctor, a lawyer, a healer, a therapist. And so learning to consciously integrate your body with your psyche, with your environment, is highly important there. And once it is accomplished, you will feel a lot healthier. So finding a purpose for yourself, recognizing that your body is affected by your mind, and trying to find ways to bring the two together is an important lesson here. I would love to hear your experiences with Saturn in the 6th house. If you don't mind mentioning approximately how old you are, how has Saturn been showing up for you, all of that would be helpful, I'm sure, for anyone who's watching this video, anyone who might be struggling with their Saturn in the 6th. You do have to consider other placements if you were born with not only Saturn, but other planets in your 6th house. And for that, the best way would be to consult a professional astrologer. You can always book a reading at anastasiadoesastrology.com, and we'll discuss Saturn and any other planets in your 6th house. I hope this video was helpful. And I hope you will take some hope from it, because that's the main purpose of this series, to see Saturn not just an evil monster, but actually the source of light and hope in our lives, right? Sort of very powerful planet it can be. I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.